On Primetime Politics, quitting cabinet.
But now it's more about my vision.
Pablo Rodriguez quits the Trudeau team, leaving the transport portfolio and his job as the Prime Minister's Quebec lieutenant. What divisions does his departure expose in the Liberal front benches? We'll convene our political strategists. Also,
Sure it's not you? No, 100%. You're a coward. You're not going to say it to my face.
a protester gets very close to the NDP leader, hurling an insult that leads to this confrontation. We'll speak to a security expert about the incident and examine the questions it raises about the dangers our politicians face. And
it really matters. We've seen what's happened in Canada.
And the writ is dropped in New Brunswick. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. The Prime Minister is losing another member of his cabinet. As expected earlier today, Pablo Rodriguez quit as Minister of Transport and Quebec Lieutenant. Mr. Rodriguez intends to run for the leadership of the Quebec Liberal Party, but he's also choosing to sit as an independent MP until the race begins, in part because he wants to be free to express his opinions, which he says does not always align with the government's.
Now I have the opportunity to set my own priorities. I was defending the priorities of the government and I did it in a very loyal way, and it's normal and it's what I had to do. But now it's more about my vision, the vision of the team that I'm building. That's what I'm going to put forward for Quebecers.
Anita Anand will now take on the duties of the Transport Minister along with her current duties as Treasury Board President. The Public Services and Procurement Minister, Jean-Yves Duclos, becomes Trudeau's Quebec Lieutenant. Well, for more on all this, we're now joined by our political strategist. Stevie O'Brien is a former Chief of Staff to Liberal ministers, now Counsel and Senior Advisor at Macmillan Advantage. Cole Hogan is a Conservative digital strategist and principal of GT and Company, and Nasha Brownridge is a former NDP strategist, now a senior consultant at Strategy Corps. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
So, we have to begin with Mr. Rodriguez here, right? Quitting cabinet, but not just quitting cabinet, also deciding to sit as an independent MP so he can feel freer to express his own viewpoint when it differs with the government. What does that say, Stevie, about cabinet solidarity, caucus solidarity in this moment in time, that he feels free to leave and now sit independently?
I don't think it says too much about cabinet solidarity or about caucus. I think this is really a very specific issue that Pablo Rodriguez needed to have the flexibility to critique the government in his bid to get the for the leadership for the Liberal Party in Quebec. So I don't think he's trying to send a message. I don't think I think it's unfortunate that that's going to be one of the interpretations coming out of this. But I think it's really he just needed the space. You saw all of the nice things people said yesterday when we knew this announcement was coming. He's well liked in caucus. He's well liked by cabinet, and I think it's just an unfortunate reality of the new job he's pursuing.
Nicole, what do you think?
Well, I think, Mr. Rodriguez has obviously earned to decide things on his own terms, but apparently he's decided that he would rather be in opposition in Quebec than in governments in Ottawa under Justin Trudeau. And apparently, the association with Trudeau and the federal Liberals is so toxic, you could perceive his perception to be that he wants enough distance that he can enter a provincial, Quebec Liberal leadership race without the baggage of Justin Trudeau. And that's why he's sitting as an independent, to differentiate himself from the current Liberal brand and keep as much distance as he can in the meantime.
Okay, Nasha, what do you take out of it?
So I don't think it would surprise anyone to say the Liberals are struggling right now. They just lost a stronghold seat in Quebec just this past Monday, and now they have a minister who's resigned who is really well liked. I think it's important to note that he hasn't resigned, but he is sitting as an independent, as we've just discussed. And that also avoids another by-election, which is maybe a gift, a parting gift, as we'll call it, from Rodriguez to the Liberal Party, because right now, I think they know it would be a very hard one to win.
Well, of course, losing the two important ones for the Liberals bookending the summer. You want to jump in, I can see.
I would say, I think Minister Rodriguez would have had conversations with the party, with the Prime Minister, and they would have tried to figure out the best way forward for everybody. And this no by-election was definitely a positive in the one column, but perhaps his ability to be more flexible was a positive for him.
Although, it's also interesting, as much as the Liberals suffered the by-election losses, the top and the tail this summer. What's interesting is that we knew that the Conservatives, out of their caucus meeting, were going to introduce a motion of non-confidence at the earliest opportunity. And really, as government, the House Leader, Karina Gould, could have played around a little bit, pushed the opposition day towards the end of this session. But that's not what is happening. We're now looking at a motion of non-confidence next week. So what does it say that the government felt confident enough to allow the opposition day, for everything people are saying about how Liberals are struggling right now, they were not afraid to let this opposition day happen?
It's a sign of strength. I think it's a sign that the Prime Minister, as he's been saying, and not everyone keeps believing him, but he's ready for a fight. He's saying, bring it. And the fact that we've seen both the Bloc and the NDP come out to say they are not going to be supporting the motion, he will be able to come out week 2 of the House and say, look, we have the confidence of the House. Parliament can work. We can still get things done and hopefully lower the temperature.
Although I don't, even if it's defeated next week, I would assume any opposition day that comes forward, there will be a motion of confidence going forward. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Liberals knew that the NDP would cave. They looked at the numbers and said, well, they're not going to want an election. Neither will the Bloc. They want to get as much as they can in the meantime. Both of these parties are weak right now. They're not going to vote in favor of a non-confidence motion, and the Liberals knew that. That's why they probably like, all right, have your opposition day whenever you want, because we know we have these other 2 opposition parties over a barrel.
Okay, Nasha?
I think it's interesting because the NDP said when they ripped up the supply and confidence agreement that they would take each vote just that way, vote by vote. So while, yes, I can understand why some people are like, why wouldn't the Liberals push it? I think the Liberals maybe did call a bluff. I don't completely disagree. They knew that either the Bloc, the NDP, or both would vote against because now isn't the time. But the NDP also said when they ripped up the agreement that they were going to be trying to stop Poilievre from playing games in the House of Commons. And I think that's also what they're doing.
Well, it's interesting because, of course, the Conservatives need both the Bloc and the NDP in order to bring down the Liberal government. They need the support of all those MPs. Does it look bad, though, after releasing what was a very dramatic video tearing up the supply and confidence agreement, that you now have the NDP leader actually not supporting this motion of non-confidence?
You know what I suspect is going to happen? The Conservatives can change the text of the motion up to Tuesday when it's tabled, and I bet now they are going to now rewrite it using some of Singh's language and make him say again, turning down his own words. And I think that they are going to use every opportunity, not just to bring the non-confidence vote, but to make Singh squirm. I think that is another strategy that they're going to do. So I would anticipate that the language of the motion will actually be different on Tuesday.
Well, you're right, because while Pierre Poilievre shared the wording of the motion as it is right now, it's not yet tabled, so it can change between now and next Tuesday. Cole, what do you think?
I think every instance of the NDP propping up the Liberal government is another nail in the coffin for the New Democrats in terms of their credibility. When they continue to vote for the Liberals, that's another time that Poilievre and the Conservatives can get up and say this, like what Canadians will ask the NDP during the next election is, why should we vote for you when you vote for Trudeau? And every time that Singh continues to vote to prop up this government, that question will get increased in rhetorical flourish.
I'm looking to October 10th, which is the pharmacare when pharmacare is anticipated to pass through the Senate. I think that's probably one of the things that the NDP would like to get done before they reconsider their position on a confidence motion. So after Thanksgiving, it might be a different game.
Okay, after Thanksgiving, it might be different. But right now, how bad does it look for the NDP to have this opportunity to bring down a government which they have essentially lambasted in this video on YouTube at the first opportunity to do so?
So I don't think the NDP never said they were going to tear down the government. They were tearing up the agreement, and there is a difference. So while they're going to take every vote as it is, vote by vote, and see when there is merit, I also do agree with Stevie that timing matters. And right now, they're not rushing to an election, but if there is one, they'll be ready to go. But a big piece is that pharmacare has not passed yet. And the NDP has been saying today, they know that Pierre Poilievre doesn't want it to go through, and they're not going to let him take down a very, very important piece of legislation for Canadians.
Now, here we are, the first week back into this session, or into this parliament, the beginning of this session. And I have to say, the gloves are off. The language right now is flying on all sides. But what's interesting is watching how aggressive the government is being right now, calling Mr. Poilievre a liar, accusing Mr. Singh of abandoning progressive values. Again, the Liberals are still 20 points behind the polls, behind the Conservatives. Very far behind. They have been for a year. Can the government gain some traction with this type of strategy?
I think if you take this type of strategy, they're being more aggressive. They're campaign ready, or getting that sort of campaign Trudeau out. He's good on his feet that way. But you marry that with what's happening south of the border and the rhetoric that we're seeing coming out of Donald Trump, and we're showing that as sort of an alternative. I think the Liberals really want to have an election after the American election, so that people have seen that and perhaps want to rethink their choice of leader up here.
Cool.
Yeah, I watched Karina Gould and the Liberal government sort of go at Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and I think the Liberal Party is auditioning to be the opposition party again. It's not the government's job to go after the official opposition, but they viewed it, instead of governing, we're just going to attack the opposition parties. And if you want the job, you're probably going to get it.
Okay. Nasha?
I think in part, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are deflecting a little bit from their own struggles right now. Again, there was the by-election losses this week and previously earlier in the summer. There's a lot going on, a resignation today. So by attacking the opposition members, I mean, they are doing their best to try and show Canadians that maybe they're in better shape than they are.
I'd also say that people don't know Poilievre well enough, and I think it's about time that the Liberals and the NDP start, exposing some of his policy positions or what is going to happen. People have been focused on, they're angry at Justin, and that's, I think, why we're seeing the polling numbers where they are. But I'm not sure how much they've sat down and really considered what the alternative will mean.
Well, of course, as we gather here, and given what the Conservatives have said, trying to bring down the government as soon as they can, and of course how struggling the Liberals are in the poll numbers, there is a lot of talk right now. When will there actually be an election? October of next fall was the working theory last spring. Given how toxic things are right now, how strong the language is right now, like really on all sides in this first week back, how much longer do you think this Parliament can actually stand?
Well, best case is to the budget, whenever that gets tabled, April, May, June, in that, because the government has some say on when they're going to table the budget. But given the level of rhetoric and given the toxicity and all of the potential shenanigans that could happen, I'd say 50-50, we can make it to spring.
Cool.
If I look at Toronto St. Paul's and I look at the result in Montreal, there's negative, ongoing, consistent, negative momentum for the Liberal Party of Canada. They got less than 5% in Winnipeg. That's a score they haven't netted since 1917. These are historical lows for the Liberal Party. And what are you going to do to improve your situation to give you a fighting chance in the next election? You might end up being the third or fourth party afterwards, back to 2011 levels.
Okay. What do you think?
I think from an NDP perspective, we can't forget there is also provincial elections happening in October. So we see, I believe it's BC, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick are going to be hitting the polls. And we all know there is voter confusion when you start to have that many elections all at once. And the NDP is currently government in BC, and they have a shot in Saskatchewan. So when they're making a decision on whether or not they want to go to an election, though it may not be their decision in the end, there is other parties at play. I think they're going to take that into account. So we're going to have to see, but I do agree. I think it will be difficult to get past the budget this upcoming spring.
Okay.
We factor in, we don't know when the Ontario election is going to be as well. There's another wild card in your planning.
Well, guaranteed we're here until the budget, if not afterwards. So for this evening, thank you very much for the time. Stevie, Cole, and Nasha, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, time now for a look at what happened in politics today.
I have informed the Prime Minister of a resignation as Canada's Transport Minister and Quebec Lieutenant, effective immediately.
It's now official. Pablo Rodriguez is leaving the Trudeau cabinet and also the Liberal caucus. Rodriguez leaves behind the transportation portfolio and his role as Trudeau's Quebec lieutenant so he can run for the Quebec Liberal Party leadership that kicks off in the new year. Until then, Rodriguez says he will sit as an independent MP so he can express his own views, which are not always in line with the government's. The Commons Defense Committee says it will investigate Harjit Sajjan. Back in June, the Globe and Mail reported Sajjan ordered the rescue of 6 in Afghanistan as the country fell back to the Taliban. Those instructions reportedly complicated the rescue of Canadian citizens trapped on the ground. Today, the Defense Committee voted unanimously to call Sajjan, top defense officials, and global affairs to testify. In the past, Sajjan has said his actions were in keeping with government policy. And finally tonight, a famous portrait recovered in Italy. Canadian officials were on hand today for a ceremony in Rome, which saw the return of a famous photograph of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Taken by renowned Canadian photographer Yusuf Karsh, it was stolen from Ottawa's Chateau Laurier in 2022, where it hung in public view. It was not until last week that Ottawa police announced the piece was located in Italy. Once back on Canadian soil, the portrait will be returned to the Chateau Laurier and hung in the hotel's reading room, its original spot. Well, many Canadians have already seen that confrontation that took place earlier this week between the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and a protester on Parliament Hill. And for those who have not, take a look at the incident as it happened.
Would you vote not confident tonight if it came up? Corrupted bastard. Want to say something? What? Want to say something? You say nothing? Who said that? You got something to say?
I didn't say corrupted bastard, but I said...
Is that what you said?
No, I did not say that.
Who said it?
Somebody behind me said that.
Was it me?
Was it you?
No.
You sure?
If it was me, I'd admit it, buddy.
Was it you or not?
If it was me, I'd admit it.
What'd you say then?
I didn't say nothing. It wasn't me. It was a gentleman behind me, I guess.
Who is it then? Point it
I
out.
have no idea who it was, buddy.
My word. You sure it's not you?
No, 100%.
You're a coward. You're not going to say it to my face. That's what's up.
So obviously Jagmeet Singh not taking the insult that was hurled at him on Parliament Hill. And for his reaction to what took place, let's bring in security expert Michael Kempa, a professor of criminology at the University of Ottawa. Michael, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Michael.
Now, listen, we should note that since the incident happened, security seems to have been ramped up around Parliament Hill, on Parliament Hill. The Parliamentary Protective Services now checking credentials of people going onto the grounds near West Block. But what was your reaction to just how close protesters were able to get to the NDP leader? Because I think a lot of people are reacting to the fact that Jagmeet Singh pushed back. But really, at the end of the day, the protesters were very, very close to where politicians exit and enter that building.
Right. So in other words, why would there even be a need for him to push back? Why would people be that close? The main issue for me is I was very surprised because Parliament and the lawns especially are intended for public accessibility. They're very important spaces for protest, symbolically important. People need to have their voices heard directly by people who are in Parliament. But the points of entry and exit where politicians and staff for Parliament go in and out around the back there that we see, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that general members of the public would be allowed into that space to confront people on their way in and out of work.
In and out of work, as you say. And, you know, we should talk a little bit about the protesters because there have been more of them in recent days, ever since Parliament resumed. You know, I'm wondering, what do we actually know about some of these protesters? Because some, we can't speak for all, but some have been yelling at obscenities at just about anyone that's going to work on the Hill.
Well, people speak about what they call convoy-adjacent groups, and by that they mean, of course, the original Freedom Convoy was a very multi-layered thing comprised of many different groups of protesters, some of which were affiliated with all of the main names that we know, Tamara Leach and Chris Barber and those original organizers, and some of whom simply were not. So at the moment, all around Parliament, for 2 years now, we've had a group of people that are known as the Wellington Street Regulars. There are a small number of people that have been camped out for 2 years, and formally and informally, their numbers swell and contract depending on the state of play around Parliament. So if we have major protests moving through the area, such as the Save the Children rallies of a year ago, their numbers swell. When Parliament opens, their numbers swell. They attract members, some of whom are unknown to the main sort of the regulars on the ground, and they go about their business. So very, you could say, loosely convoy adjacent, motivated by some of the same things but certainly not under the control of the original organizers.
So convoy, Jason, as you say, but I'm wondering then, if the question, as you said, is why did that even happen, where people are going in and out? What should be done here? Because we live in a time, even in this country, where there was already a Parliamentary Hill shooter. We had the would-be gunman who tried to ram the gates of Rideau Hall to get to the Prime Minister, and not to mention the political violence we're seeing south of the border. Do things need to change here?
Well, yes, we did change things after the shooter at Parliament in 2018, where we established the Parliamentary Protective Service as an entity on paper separate from the RCMP, although it has many RCMP members working within it. The PPS, that service, doesn't have many full arrest powers in many cases. They sort of work like a private security agency that has the power to trespass people and get them off of parliamentary property and call the RCMP in when arrests need to be made. We have the RCMP, who's responsible for providing protective services to the Prime Minister, cabinet members, and high-level MPs that have been receiving threats. This is sort of a poor hodgepodge or coordination. There's been some talk. The head of the Federation, the Union for the RCMP, would like everything given back to the RCMP. The commissioner of the RCMP doesn't think that would be a great idea. I would lean towards what the commissioner has to say, because we know that the RCMP does not have the resources or the right training structures to get people into place for what it already does. So taking on more functions, not a great idea.
So what is a great idea then to actually address the security concerns?
Well, I suppose you have to really get serious and say we've got a model of federal agencies that comes from the late 1800s. None of our contemporaries in the Five Eyes, the Americans, British, Australians, and New Zealanders, have maintained those structures. In the US, they have a proper federal policing service, the FBI. They have a completely separate protective service, the Secret Service, that secures politicians. Australians have something very similar. We should probably move in those lines. Either create two very distinct streams within the RCMP with different recruitment and training strategies for people who do that federal policing piece, or simply establish completely separate institutions for federal policing and the protection of high-profile politicians.
Michael Kempa, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Always, thanks.
The writ was dropped in New Brunswick this morning as Premier Blaine Higgs asked the Lieutenant Governor to dissolve the provincial legislature. But the start of this campaign comes as Angus Reid has some dismal news for Higgs. The Institute's latest poll saying his approval rating is only 30%, the lowest of all the country's premiers. That is less than half the approval rating of Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, who registered the highest of the premiers at 66% approval. Still, Mr. Higgs is hoping his Progressive Conservative Party can secure a third mandate. Take a listen.
I would encourage anyone not to get locked into any one particular issue, but look at the province as a whole and say, we haven't experienced this ever. We haven't experienced tourism like we've seen, the major events that happened in the province. We haven't experienced the growth like we've seen in housing or population. We haven't experienced the private sector growth that we're seeing in investment.
Well, for more on the campaign, we did speak earlier today with John Chilibeck. He is a legislative reporter for the Telegraph-Journal newspaper, and I asked him how Mr. Higgs and his Progressive Conservative Party are looking going into this campaign.
Well, he did have a mini caucus revolt last year, and because he lost 7 of those 8 people who were revolting out of his caucus, they're not reoffering. He has lost a lot of volunteers that help you run a campaign. Now, having said that, he's coming out today firing and saying that he's brought New Brunswick to a certain place. He's increased the population since he took power 6 years ago by about 100,000 people. And for someone in Ontario, that might not seem like a lot, but this is a province that only has 860,000 people right now. So it's sizable, but with that comes some growing pains, and he's pointed that out. And he says that he'll offer one big juicy promise, and that's a big cut to the HST. He says he'll shave 2 points off the 15% HST sales tax, and he says that's what people need in this cost of living crisis.
Now, of course, Mr. Higgs, as Premier, took some heat for the way he handled French education in the province, also for his stance on trans students in the province. How do you think those issues might play out? Put them up against the other issues that might actually play big this time around.
Well, Premier Higgs has a problem in Francophone regions in New Brunswick because he promised to learn French, and he really hasn't. He even was very apologetic this morning at the Lieutenant Governor's, where he held a news conference. So he hasn't really made inroads, and the Liberals have pretty much won all those ridings. So for him to have a breakthrough in Francophone New Brunswick, it'll take quite a bit. Now he's recruited, bilingual candidates and such, so hopefully they can carry the message for him in his case. When it comes to the transgender issue, this is a funny one because he's really speaking to his base, people who would already vote for him, I think, in that regard. So he's sort of come out against a policy that they had in schools, that children under the age of 16 could use their preferred pronoun or name without their parents' consent. And he's sort of calling this a parental rights issue. But I think who that appeals to is people who probably already voted for him before. So I'm not sure how much of an issue it'll play in this election, other than it might galvanize people on both sides, people who are for and against it, and it might get them to volunteer and vote. We've already seen a lot of literature coming through the mail here by an organization called Campaign Life Coalition, telling people to vote for Higgs and not for Susan Holt.
Okay. Well, of course, the campaign is just underway with the writ being dropped today, so we're watching closely, John. Hopefully you and I will speak again in the weeks to come, but for this evening, thank you for that.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
And John and I did go on to talk about the other parties in this campaign and some of the issues that could affect how New Brunswickers will vote. You can see our full conversation on the cpac.ca website and on our YouTube channel. And that is our program for this Thursday evening. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow night. Until then, take care.